It has been said that average people want you to stay average. Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast, the podcast designed to challenge you to break the mold that average has on the world. Each episode offers insights directly from those who choose to break average every day. Now, for the latest insights, here are your hosts, Paul Gustafson and Rick Morris.
Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast. My name is Paul Gustafson, and I am so excited to be with you. I've got my friend, my co-host, Rick Morris. Hey, Rick, how are you, brother?
I'm doing fantastic, brother. This is the season finale here. No, not quite the season finale. We got one more. Almost the season finale.
It is the conclusion, the completion, if you will, of our book series, though.
That's right. That's right.
So,
16
and we
great books to lead.
16. I mean, the 15 we've done have been fantastic. We got one more to go today. And today, this is a book that you picked. And you kind of caught me off guard on this one, Rick. I didn't see this one coming, but I'm glad you picked it. Why don't you tell everybody what the book is? And I'm curious too, our listeners and viewers, if they had seen this. So we have to find a way to poll them to see if they've read this book. But go ahead.
Yeah. So the book we chose is The Alchemist. And I actually read this in like right around year 2000, 2001. It was right during the dot bomb. And so like I was struggling, trying to find out where I was going, that kind of stuff. Somebody told me about the book and I read it. And at first, I didn't know that I liked it. Right when I first read it, it was one of those things I had to take a second kind of reread because it's more of a fable, but it's got a fable with a ton of life lessons. As a matter of fact, once I really fell in love with the book and started to do some research, the author Coelho on this, I found out he wrote this book in only 2 weeks in 1987. And he explained that he was able to write it at this pace because this story was written in his soul, he said. And he said the book itself, the main theme is about finding your destiny, right?
Yeah.
And it's more self-help book than it is literature. But the advice that was given to the main character, Santiago, here is when you really want something to happen, the whole universe will conspire so that your wish comes true. And we talk about this all the time. We've done Think and Grow Rich. We've done all these things about energy and the creation of energy and manifestation of energy, advanced attraction in the brain. And so this book was really about it. But even the publishing of the book had a flair of the story itself. So essentially, when the book was originally released, it was really an obscure, like Brazilian publishing house that released this book, and it sold okay, but it was largely a failure. And so, having it not do as well, the publisher actually gave the author the rights back to the book, and then the author itself was needed to kind of heal. So he went to the Mojave Desert for like 40 days and really kind of meditated on everything and just went to go find himself. He knew this was his life's destiny, but he wasn't sure like how to proceed. And when he returned from the Mojave Desert, he decided to just start knocking on doors and believed in the book still. And of course, now it's got like a Guinness Book World Records for translations into different languages, and has become one of these, again, obscure books, but people that have read it, it's really made a mark on them. So, and then we were talking beforehand, you said, yeah, there's got to be a movie out there. And we just found out that Will Smith has the rights to do something with it, but we'll see. And he just acquired that like July of 2021. So we'll see what happens with that, Paul.
I would love to see this in movie format. I'm just totally shocked. Like, there's all sorts of great books of fiction that have been turned into movies. And this one, why not? I mean, it is the hero's journey, guys. That's what I love about it. We talk about Joseph Campbell's hero's journey kind of format. This represents that format clearly, right? 3 major phases: departure, initiation, and return. We can unpack some of that, but it is, Rick, I'm glad you picked it. It's an epic quest, a story of transformation. It's really representative of all our lives, right? Santiago is you and me. Right.
Yeah,
so yeah. I love how I read a follow-up on it. And he says, I'm Santiago, the key leading character in the book. So as the author, he says, I'm Santiago. But the truth is that all the readers are too. So you and I, when we read this, we need to put ourselves in that position and understand what's going on. And it's phenomenal. So I love it. It's how to live a fulfilling life. And who wouldn't want to live a fulfilling life? So lots of great takeaways. One of mine I want to get into, and we can kind of dive all around. So certainly we can unpack the story a little bit. We want to be careful there, though, because we don't want to give any spoiler alerts. We encourage you to go grab this book, read it, listen to it. By the way, the Audible, it's I'm trying to remember the actor, the British actor that does the narration on it. Fantastic. Lion, I think his name is Jeremy Lyons. It'll come to me here in a minute, but fantastic Audible. But so we can get in the story a little bit, but let's get into this idea of your personal legend.
Yeah.
Right. So that was kind of an interesting take. So along the way, Santiago meets different guides, right? So it's not just one guide. It's not just Gandalf kind of guide. He meets different guides along the way. And early on, he meets this old king, this old man who talks about his personal legend. So what, just for the sake of all our listeners and viewers, what is a personal legend? This is a phenomenal concept.
It's really your destiny, right? Ultimately that personal legend is what you were destined to do. So when it starts talking about, there's a quest for treasure, and there's a quest for, all these things that we think are our dreams. And what I loved about it, and we've said this multiple times in our podcast, but you fall in love with the journey, not the destination. And I think this book is that through and through, right? Because basically there's a quest for this destination all throughout, but the real treasure that he finds is the lessons that he learned along the journey.
Yeah. And I love this concept. I went through the Kindle, Rick, and I highlighted and looked at every segment where they talk about this idea of your personal legend. Right. So again, he first gets introduced to this concept from the old man, who's sort of the second guide. I don't know if he's the first or second guide that he meets, maybe the third one. Again, he meets folks along the way. He takes this departure. We talked about the 3 phases. The departure, he's called to adventure, dreams of hidden treasure. And it's once he takes that dream, the initiation, the second phase is when he starts to understand what this idea of personal legend is. So he journeys into Africa. There's a lot of different trials, testing of his faith, skills, courage. But the old man that he meets, who's king, I can't remember his name, he says, personal legend is what you've always wanted to accomplish, right? And then he adds, when we're young, everyone knows what their personal legend is. At that point in their lives, everything is clear and everything is possible. We're not afraid to dream. We earn for everything that we like to see happen in our lives. But as time passes, a mysterious force begins to convince us that it'll be impossible for us to realize our personal legend. Now, I've changed the pronouns in there a little bit so that we can understand it from the context of us, the listeners and the viewers. But I thought that was phenomenal. This mysterious force he talks about appears to be negative in our life, but actually it shows you how to realize your personal legend. And that kind of caught me. I'm like, okay, what is this what is this mysterious force? And I think, and I want to get your take on it, I think the mysterious force that he's talking about is fear itself.
Without a doubt.
Right. So it's facing fear. So yeah, you comment on that.
Yeah. I mean, fear is the bigger obstacle than the obstacle itself. He said that there's the quote, one of the quotes I wrote down here, it says, tell your heart that the fear of suffering is worse than the suffering itself, and that no heart has ever suffered when it goes in search of its dreams, because every second of the search is a second's encounter with God and with eternity. And what he's talking about there is so many people, especially those entrepreneurs that we talk about the timing trap, we talk about all these other things. It's the fear of doing it. Then we tend to beat ourselves up. I have a friend of mine who's going through a really, really difficult situation right now. And there's a lot of guilt in his brain. There's a lot of like he's just literally beating himself up every day. And I keep telling him that what you've done to yourself and your brain is far worse than whatever the outcome is going to be. Like you've already suffered way worse because you've led yourself through 50 variables that most likely will never happen. You know, even as a project manager in my world, you do risk analysis, you can come up with 300 risks. And the one thing that's going to happen is one thing that's not on your list, right? I mean, that's just the way it works. It's the way life works. But our fear of failure, or fear of not getting our dream, or fear of something may happen to us is generally far worse than what actually does. Because even if something like that comes true, Paul, like if you look at me going back through when I went through that near bankruptcy, I had those fears and I had all those doubts. But even at the worst point, I learned a lesson that I've been able to take forward, you know, with me. So even in that scenario, our fear is bigger, a bigger obstacle than what it is that we're actually going through. He also says any pursuit requires entering uncharted territory, and that's what's scary. But with any great risk comes great reward. The experiences you gain in pursuing your dream. Now, let me say that again, because it's the experiences you gain while pursuing your dream.
Yeah.
That's what makes it worthwhile. Not necessarily whether or not you achieve the dream itself. It's the taking action, overcoming the fear, and whatever happens. It's the experience that you gain while that's happening. That's the real treasure.
Yeah, it's so powerful. You know, and I'll unpack that fear some more because, guys, let's face it, Rick, you and I, you just shared your story. We all face fear. All of us. It encounters us maybe daily in different doses, in different amounts, in different ways. In this book, what I thought was interesting is they talk about fear of suffering, which you just shared a great quote on, the fear of failure, which we've all experienced. And I started thinking about all those fears. Part of that too is our limiting beliefs. So our limiting beliefs really reflect and kind of appear in as fears, right? So if we face those fears, I was trying to get to I went back a few years ago. I did a little study on fears, and I identified 12 different fears. I'm gonna see if I can find that for you guys. But I think that fear is really what gets in the way for a lot of us. But what he's saying is, you know, this is the Alchemist. This is the different guides along the way. If you face that fear head on, you know, then you're going to find yourself moving through it. Stephen Pressfield wrote a great book on this, talking about the resistance that we experience. And I share like, hey, if you don't feel resistance, if you don't feel a little bit of resistance, a little bit of fear, you're probably heading in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
So it was really good.
Whenever I start kind of getting into my story of where I've been through my career, and I've had a bunch of different jobs, a lot of cool opportunities. I've been in some cool rooms, right? And people always ask, how did you do that? And I just did it. Like to me, I don't have that fear of failure that most, because I know that there's that lesson. And in fact, that's going to go back all the way to episode 1, which is I think one of my favorite episodes that you and I have ever done in the 70 plus episodes of podcasting we've done, when we did the one on failure.
Yeah.
I think it's really, really cool that we're dovetailing that now with Alchemist. So if you haven't heard that episode, go back. It's one of my favorite that we ever did. But the point was I scared in every one of these steps I've ever taken? Heck yeah. But I like crave that. Like I love that. And back to the quote, you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take, right? And like Gretzky said, yeah, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. That's
right. Yeah. Yeah. So let me share. I'm curious. I'm going to throw I'm going to serve some tennis balls to you, Rick. You ready? Right. I'm going to throw 12 different fears at you. Okay. And maybe there's more, you know, I don't have the fear of spiders in here, so I'm not doing those kind of fears. All right. The first one is the fear of adversity, right? So these are 12 common fears that we may experience when we're on the journey. And the first one is the fear of adversity. So, all right. And then there's the fear of conflict, and we can unpack any of these.
Yeah.
Just seeing what sticks with you, what really kind of catches your attention. The fear of conflict is the second one. The fear of change, right? Like, oh, we're going to change this. I've seen this too many times, where individuals and groups and teams have a fear of change. Right?
Tawadi disease.
Yeah, yeah. Fear of process. This is the one I'm guilty of, guys. This is my challenge right here, where like, ooh, I start to look at all the work that has to be done, that needs to be done, all the steps that I've got to go do that, and that, ooh, that's daunting.
Yeah.
Fear of process, that gets me. Fear of rejection. Fear of rejection. You know, not making the team kind of thing, right? Fear of vulnerability. That's a big fear. Like, ooh, I don't know if I want to stick my neck out and do that. Fear of being alone. And that some of these all obviously play together. They do. Fear of being alone. The fear of pain or injury. Here in the book, they talk about it as the fear of suffering. Same thing. Fear of failure. We've already mentioned that one. The fear of disappointment. Like, I'm going to disappoint somebody if I don't do this, so I better say yes. The fear of success. I think that is true. I think people actually fear, like, wow, what if we are successful? Then what? You know, and this gets into, you and I had a discussion, I think it was with the charisma myth, on imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
All right. And then the fear of death. So those are 12 fears. Which ones kind of jump out for you?
I think there's one big one that's off that list. That's the fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
Right.
Fear of the unknown.
Yeah. Basically, we won't take that step because we don't know what's going to happen. So we'd rather stay with what we have. Maybe that fits into change a little bit, but fear of the unknown, I see is like one of the biggest ones I see.
Yeah. Fear of the, and that's how I couched it when I did this, but you're right. Fear of the unknown. When we unpack that, the change, like, well, gosh, we don't know what we're getting. No, we're comfortable right where we're at. And so there's this unknown element. But yeah, you're right. That's definitely,
I think one of mine, if I was going to pick one, I feel like I deal with a lot, because you went self-reflective with process. I think it's fear of adversity.
Yeah.
For me, it's sometimes I will take the comfort versus, well, again, we'll go all the way back to the weight loss journey. For 25 years, I just took comfort because it was going to be really hard to start losing the weight that I needed to lose that weight. And what's funny is, people are celebrating that, and it's very sweet, and I appreciate that. But basically, they're celebrating that for 25 years that I just didn't care about myself, right? And so now I'm just eating what I'm supposed to and doing what I'm supposed to, you know what I mean? But I think it was that fear of adversity, of just how hard it would be to overcome that kept me trapped for so long.
Yeah.
I think those are good. I think those are interesting.
Yeah. But allow us to celebrate with you, right? Okay.
Of course.
Yeah. And this encourages and inspires other people, which is really great. When we take that journey, when we become Santiago and we step forward out of our comfort zone, because let's face it, Santiago, for him to pursue that personal legend, he had to step out of the comfort zone every single time. And if we're Santiago and we're pursuing our personal legend, our goal, our dreams, our aspirations, we're going to experience some fears, maybe some of those 12 that we just talked about. And we've got to face them head on. And you have a story there, Rick. We all do. If we unpack our story and tell that story, it's a story of perseverance. And this is what this book's about, right? Perseverance. It's a story of perseverance that inspires other people to persevere and pursue their personal legend too. Now that's a term, again, we're kind of unpacking that. We're getting into the fears a bit, and maybe we can unpack some more on this personal legend thing. Like, how do you define a personal legend? Like it, and we've talked about, you said it was kind of your destiny, but it's captured by you setting an intentional direction in terms of what you want, where you're going, and what you're pursuing. So what are some ways for us to capture that personal legend?
Ways to well, first of all, just like the author itself, you got to feel destined to do it. It's the same thing to me as your personal legend is what you feel called or compelled to do.
Yeah.
That's really what it is. And I want to dovetail something he said here into what we were just talking about in the fears and the fear of the unknown. But one of the quotes that I have in this is to make the decision. And he says, when someone makes a decision, he is really diving into a strong current that will carry him to places he's never dreamed of when he first made the decision. And that was something that really had an impact on me. Coming back to even personal legend, people are like, well, I don't know what I feel called or compelled to do. It's in making that first decision that this is something I'm going to go after, getting over that fear or any of the 12 fears, the fear of the unknown, to take that first step. And then the current, the momentum, you may not end up there. You know, we talked about, I Think and Grow Rich talks about the same thing, right? You set a mantra, and you say that mantra, and it helps create the energy that's going to bring things to you. And I shared my mantra that started with a specific direction, very specific direction. And my mantra is still true now, even though that direction has changed like 7 times, it still fits. It's the same thing, as that I just had the intention. I went after it. I took that step, that current took me, and then I ended up like at a fork in the road. You know what I mean? And so I had to make another step or another decision, and then the current carried me. And that is essentially your journey to that destiny that he's talking about, to what it is that you're going after.
Yeah, that's good. It's so important. You know, so many great quotes out of this whole idea of personal legend. We'll put a link. I found a link. I'm not sure, it's Inc. magazine that did goalcast.com, 12 steps living your personal legend. We'll put that link on there. But what they say in that article is that your personal legend refers to your story, your life, and what you do with it. And that's what you're talking about. You're making decision points, jumping into that stream. That's a great quote. So the question that we need to ask ourselves is, what kind of stories will people tell of us when we pass? You know, and I hate to talk about morbid thought, but realize that every decision we make, this is Andy Stanley in his book, Better Decisions, Fewer Regrets, says every decision we make is ultimately telling a story. What story are you going to tell? And that's what we see from Santiago and Paulo's book here. Just phenomenal, you know. So let's capture that. You and I today, this moment, we have a decision point that's going to be in front of us. And if we look at that decision point and recognize that this is some story that's going to be told of us, it's going to take us on that stream. It's going to allow us to pursue something and be able to see the treasure that we're really seeking, and be able to, and we all have a personal legend. Again, it's a new phrase. I haven't used this phrase until today, but I do like the concept of personal legends. Let's dive into the secret of happiness. You want to do that?
For sure.
Okay.
I mean, so the first secret to happiness to me is another quote I have in here, is to focus on your own journey.
Yep.
A quote that I have here says, if someone isn't what others want them to be, the others become angry. Everyone seems to have a clear idea of how other people should lead their lives, but none about his or her own.
Yeah.
Right. So it's so easy to be influenced by others, but you'll be miserable if you end up living someone else's life. There's nothing wrong with taking advice and learning from others, but make sure it aligns with your desires and passions, your personal legend. So first of all, the secret to happiness is yours. It's your definition. It's not others. And when you share, I would be, somebody says, we talk about this in business all the time too. There are people that have no desire to move up past a certain job.
Yeah.
And other people are like, oh, they're happy. They that's where they wanted to be. That's what they have. That's great. Good for them. Right. I'm not here to tell them they should move up or move down or left or right or whatever, if they find their happiness. And so you just got to make sure that it's yours. So if you share your secret to happiness with somebody else and they rain all over it, which most likely, right, Paul? Most likely they will.
Yeah.
They will.
Yep.
Then the first thing to remember is that the definition and the pursuit is yours.
Yeah. And I think I would say this to your point. Exactly. Right. So you are going to get some resistance, and you may have some naysayers that are in your life saying, no, don't, or here's what you should do. Here's the script that you need to follow. But here, and we're talking about breaking average, guys. This is a key component to breaking average. You've got to take initiative. You've got to take that step forward. You need inertia. You got to build momentum. When you start to build the momentum, then the world will conspire to help you achieve what it is that you're going after. All right. But it takes that first movement, that step forward, despite the naysayers that may happen. I love the quote you just shared. It's early on in the book. It's one of the early quotes that I captured. Everyone seems to have a clear idea of how other people should live their lives. I'm guilty of that.
Yeah.
You know, as a dad, I'll do that. But his second point is, but none about his or her own. I would disagree just a little bit. I think not very many have clarity in terms of how they should live their own. Right.
Let me dovetail on that for a second.
Yeah.
Because when I read that, it made a big impact.
Yeah.
To me, it's the people that are telling you your dream is wrong are generally the people that don't have their own. And that's where I'm going. Because if you share your journey with somebody who has their own dream and their own pursuit, then then what they'll say it generally is giving you advice for the journey along the way, or something that helped them or whatever. So it's more supportive. It's the ones that are trying to derail your dream. As a matter of fact, they said, don't let anyone or anything derail your dreams. Another quote, which to me, probably my favorite quote in the book, it says, you must understand that love never keeps us from pursuing our personal legend.
Yes.
If I abandon that pursuit, it's because it wasn't true love. The advice is not letting anybody there, right? If someone really loves you as a friend, as a confidant, as a husband or wife, they will support you and will be there for you. If they're not, then maybe they're not for you.
Yes.
Right. And that to me is the tie-in there, Paul, where you can disagree because you're looking inside your heart and going, no, I feel like I'm really supportive. I know where I want to go. And I'm really supportive of other people's dreams. I think it's the people that aren't supportive that quote really applies to.
Yeah, that's a great point. I love that. Where is that quote? You just shared it. It's the love quote. He makes it a couple times.
Yeah.
But what hit me was the importance of having that. It's kind of a filter. You know, love's not going to keep you from going and pursuing that personal legend, that goal, that dream, that aspiration. It's actually going to encourage you to go do it.
Right.
So that's the check, right? Like, okay, do you really love me? Jesus asked that question of his disciples. Do you really love me? He was really checking. It was sort of this check, the same one. In fact, they referenced the same king in this book, Alchemist. The king that's represented is the same. There's a king that's represented in the New Testament as well, or actually the Old Testament, and then referred to in line with Jesus. So I'm not getting into religious stuff here, but what's interesting is the symbology of that. And we need that same question. Now, we may not ask that externally to somebody, do you really love me? But we need to ask that internally. Do you really love me? Then you're going to let me go. You're going to let me go pursue this, you know, and that real love that's there, and it's reciprocated. We got to make sure that it's the same way, right? That we love them. Are we going to allow them to go? You know, even though it may pain us a little bit to allow somebody to step forward, you know, like our son or our daughter going into a talent show, and you're like, ooh, you're afraid of the potential embarrassment and disappointment that might happen, fear. But no, you're going to allow them to do that. You're going to allow them to go forward with that because that's an aspiration that they have, and you want to encourage them in it no matter, even if they do step and do. You're going to encourage them to do it. Why? Because they're going to learn from it, because they're going to grow from it, because it's a pursuit of what they want, and they're going to be able to achieve something great, and you love them. And that's what love is all about. Love is for, not against. Love is for, not against. And that's one of the big takeaways out of this book.
And love's converse to that is ego. In how many marriages have broken down or relationships have broken down because someone took an opportunity to grow and did.
Yeah.
And then there's the jealousy of the growth, that ego starts to come in. And so then they begin to derail. And so I always find, like, what was the response to the failure as a defining point of whether or not somebody really loves me? Because if I decide to do something, and Paul, you're my, you advise me, hey, Rick, you probably shouldn't do that. Here's why I wouldn't do that. And I go, no, I'm going to go do that anyway. Now that I failed, your response to me shows me, is it love or ego? And here's what I mean by that, because if you came back with, I told you, dude, I told you that was a mistake, that's ego.
Yeah.
That's your need to being right and failing to meet me where I am, versus the love side would be, all right, well, now that we know that that's a failure, what'd you learn?
Yeah.
Right. Those two different little responses to shows me if that's love or ego that's driving this relationship. Because even in failure, we should learn, we should grow. Yeah. And as someone who loves someone else, they should be encouraging them to find what that growth was, not to prove that they shouldn't have taken that step and they were right in the first place.
Yeah, that's great. It's a great point. And we grow because of our failures too, right?
Yeah.
And we talked about that first episode of season 3, the importance of failure, what we've learned through failure. So it's okay. We want somebody to step out of the comfort zone. We as leaders, helping encourage others to break average, means that we need to encourage them to step out of that comfort zone and potentially fail, falter, fall. But the question is, are we going to help them get back up and say, hey, cool, what did you learn from that? Here for you. Even if we may have advised them a little bit differently on the front end, they still step forward and we're still there for them. Then that's good. That's good. Like my girlfriend, now my wife, but my girlfriend in college, that was the moment I knew I wanted to marry her, when I was going through a real struggle and a challenge, and she was for me. She encouraged me with hope. And that's a story in itself that I'll tell again one day. But that was powerful. And that made me realize that these are the kind of people I need to have around me. So
yeah,
really good stuff, man.
I want to kind of wrap this up, and I'm trying to walk a fine line, because we've done a really good job of not giving away the book, because we really want to make sure people read this book, but we want to talk about what we gleaned from it. The reason why this book stayed with me as it did, because it was 20 years ago that I read this, was throughout the book, the journey is to find treasure, this treasure. And there's multiple trials and challenges along the way, and multiple things that begin to prove through signs and through everything else that our hero in this story, Santiago, is on the right path. And there's several signs that kind of come together to where you think, okay, the ending is literally going to find what it was that he was seeking. And there's a series of events. And so to not give it, I'm trying my best here. I'm really walking a line.
Hold on a second. Let me help you out. Guys, spoiler alert. Spoiler alert.
I know. I'm trying to make sure I'm doing this without a spoiler. That's why I'm choosing my words here.
Okay.
Okay, spoiler alert, he finds his treasure.
Yeah.
But it wasn't necessarily what we all thought that treasure would be. And that's coming back all the way to that first point, that, and even my journey that I've shared with the mantra, and how it's still a very clear goal. And I think I still find this goal, but it is vastly different than when I took my first step of my journey. And that means that when we realize our dreams, or when we say our dreams come true, or we find our personal legend, it may not look like what we thought it looked like when we took our first step of the journey, but we never find it unless we take that first step.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's so good. We never find it unless we take that first step. So powerful. I think this gets us to our tip. I mean, there's so much we could unpack, and such a powerful story, but let's dive into that final tip and challenge here. We'll leave a homework assignment for everybody to go read this book or listen to it. But what's the tip or challenge that you want to leave our listeners and viewers with?
Yeah, this one's a tough. I think that the tip is to read the book. I really do. It's a fast read. It's not a hard book to get through.
Yeah.
There's a lot of interesting twists and turns. Was it like 200 some odd pages? It's not a bad book.
It's a 4-hour listen to,
Yeah.
It's so, yeah. It's
Yeah.
not that bad.
You've got a 2-hour drive somewhere. You can listen to it going and coming and finish it. And the challenge is to decide what coming into 2022 in the new year, the challenge is what's the first step?
Yeah.
What's the first step you're going to take?
I like that. What's that step that you need to take that's calling you forward?
Yeah.
And here's the thing that I got out of this, Rick, real quick. Santiago is the hero. It's the hero's journey, but he has to have some guides to get to where he's going to find that treasure, right?
Yeah.
And guess what? What we have in front of us, what yourself right now, you're either Santiago, the hero, and we believe that, but you're also the guide for somebody else. And you'll see that shift in this book. You'll see the alchemist that he meets, and the alchemist at one point, a little bit of a spoiler alert, not a bad one. The alchemist, they face a challenge where the alchemist introduces to these this opposition that comes upon them, him not as the alchemist, but as the guide, and Santiago as the alchemist.
Yeah.
And I thought that was kind of pretty cool, and it made me realize that, you know what, we're the guide too. There are moments in our life where we are a guide for somebody else. And I want to encourage you with 2 tips, really. One is recognize that you might be a guide in somebody else's life, and be ready for that. Be ready for that. Embrace that. Encourage them. Love them, right? Be that person who isn't just telling them what to do based on your own thoughts and feelings in terms of what they ought to do, but coach them up to what they want to do, what their personal legend is, what their heart's desire is. Allow them to pursue that, encourage that, applaud that, be a champion for them in that regard. But then also the other tip is face those fears, you yourself, but also allow them to face those fears. We've got fears every day, but we have decision points, and those decision points, we pause and stop because we're facing fear, and we hesitate in making those decisions because of the fear we feel. But face that fear, recognize that fear, acknowledge the fear, and step forward despite the fear. And that might be the mysterious little bit of power that you might find, wow, by stepping forward into the fear and feeling it, that allowed me, or allowed that other person, or I encouraged that other person to move forward in it. Because Santiago, when he meets the different guides along the way, they're all essentially helping him, Santiago, identify a fear, face the fear, and move forward with the fear. And maybe you as a guide can help somebody in the same way. So that's my tip and challenge. So good stuff, awesome, man. Great book. I'm glad you picked this, Rick.
I love what you just said, though, that while we're on our own journey, let's not forget to guide others in theirs.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a really, really strong point, partner.
So cool. Yeah. Rick, I love doing this with you. We're guides for each other.
For sure.
We're both on a journey, and we're supporting one another, and we want to support all our listeners out there too. We put a website together to help you. We invite you. We invite you to come to our website, take a look at some of those resources that are out there. Invite you to follow Rick. He is such a great force in my life, and I'm so appreciative of him. But we appreciate you guys too. And let's do this together. We're all on this journey together. We're all alchemists in this sense, right? And we're guides, and we can help each other. We can help those heroes in our life. But go to our website, check it out, breakingaverage.com. And really, thank you so much for being a part of this. So Rick, I'll let you have the last word and close us out.
Well, I was going to thank you, brother, as well. You've been a super calming force in my life, and you do such sweet things a lot of people don't know about. But I get random texts from you throughout the week of, hey brother, just thinking about you, that kind of stuff. I can't thank you enough for this journey that we're on together, and we're hoping that through this podcast and meeting all the time with each other, that we're inspiring you to break average, and that's our call to you, is to really break the monotony and don't just settle for certain things in your life. Let's break average and continue this journey together. And we hope that you'll continue this journey with us on that next episode. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Breaking Average podcast. If you loved what you heard, please take a moment to subscribe. All opinions and comments expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and do not reflect the opinions or views of any of the advertisers, producers, or platforms. This show was produced by R2 Multimedia. A special thank you to Milestone Melodies for our theme music. As you continue your day, what is one action that you can apply from this podcast to your life? Tune in for our next episode as we continue to challenge everyone to break average.